Yeah, so I'm basically writing a book about the adventures that myself and my partner had. We quit our jobs in 2016 and travelled around the world as with animals as our guide. And that's why I was in Barcelona and all these kind of countries that I've been mentioning on Twitter because I've been going back and writing about them again.
What is using an animal as a guide?
Well, basically, myself and my partner are both zookeepers, so we work with animals for a living. And we're not really natural born travelers. We didn't kind of have a list of countries we wanted to go to, but we did have a list of animals that we wanted to work with or see out in the wild or see if we could see that kind of thing. So we kind of used them to guide where we should go, really.
Wow, that sounds like a fantastic way to travel.
It's certainly a
Has
bit unique.
right? Are you following somebody else's guide, or are you kind of doing this on your own?
Well, we're back now. Well, we're back in the UK, so back home, as it were. But yeah, we did it for 15 months, and we did 8 countries. And yeah, in each one of those countries, we worked with quite a range of different animals. So Spain, for example, we were helping to set up an Iberian wolf sanctuary, and we were also looking after some huskies. In Italy, we were working for an animal sanctuary kind of rescue. In Norway, that was a little bit different. My partner, he was working with the farm animals, but I was actually making cheese because cheese is the other love of my life apart from animals.
Making cheese,
Um,
fascinating. I've never done it.
yeah,
I've really wanted to do it. What kind of cheese?
it's really good fun. And tasting it afterwards is the best part, obviously.
Right. What made you taste it right away? Do you store it away for years and years and have it be called aged or something?
Yeah, you had to mature it. So in Norway, we were helping to make the cheese, but we never got to taste what we actually made. But
Right.
we got to taste kind of things that had been pre-made. So
So
we got
interesting.
we got told that if you eat it right away, it doesn't really taste of much. But
Yeah, it's like just milk, right? With
yeah, basically, yeah,
stuff in it,
yeah.
bacteria or whatnot.
But yeah, after a month, it tastes really nice. And then we did have aged goat's cheese, which I called the vintage goat's
Goat
cheese.
cheese.
And yeah, after a year, that it kind of tasted like fireworks on your tongue, and then kind of melted
Fireworks.
into
Huh.
yeah. And then it kind of melted into this like creamy aftertaste. And I just wrote that in the book like yesterday, so that's why I've got it fresh in my mind.
That's awesome. So, I mean, what is the chance that you're going to be able to eat your own goat cheese in a year? Are you going to get some or never? Not going to happen.
Well, as I say, I tasted a sample of it, but not the stuff that I made myself. So the stuff that I made it in, when would it been? November 2016. So it's probably been
Oh,
consumed
that's all
by someone
gone.
by now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all gone. That's a
Yeah.
shame. That's a shame. I would love to eat some cheese I made myself. I'm also one of those weird people though that want to go to a farm and actually clean his chicken himself though, and go home with the little baggies of the meat and cook it from and know exactly where it came from.
Okay, yeah, no,
I
my
like
other
that
half does
stuff.
that. Yeah, we
Oh, really?
in Norway we were helping to process meat as well. Like they got a lot of deer carcasses. And our very first day we processed 108 kilograms of meat.
What kind of meat?
That was cow.
That's tough. I was actually just thinking that's the one I don't think I could do. I don't think I could take the bolt gun and do the thing because it's so hard. But a chicken's kind of like a fish. When I was a kid, I grew up on the Gulf, so I mean, I cleaned tons of fish. How much more difficult could it be?
Well, I'm currently a bird keeper at a zoo, so I would definitely disagree that chickens are like fish, but I
Okay,
see what you're
well,
trying to
okay,
say.
that's not fair. I should have done my research before getting on the podcast. I'd been
It's
more.
okay, you
I'd
can
be more
edit it out, it's
conservative.
fine.
I'd be more courteous with my bird talk. What kind of birds?
All sorts. We got everything from like tiny little finches and waxbills that weigh like 5 grams, all the way up to cockatoos, Vasa parrots, that kind of thing. So big wide range. And then we've got storks, like wetland waded birds, crown cranes, all sorts of things.
I mean, that's tough this time of year, right? I mean, you're coming out of winter time. You got to keep those things inside, or how does that work?
No, most of them are pretty tough. They've got access to kind of indoor warm areas, but a lot of them as individuals, they've never they've either been born in Wales in the zoo,
Oh, I see.
or they've kind of been bred in European zoos and come over to join us here. So as individuals, they're much more used to our kind of climate. But yeah, we do make sure that they've got access to shelter and to warmth if they need it and that kind of thing.
So, I mean, I guess as far as finding a theme for your writing, you have one, right? I mean, you've got this wonderful profession that allows you to get up close and personal with animals and actually know what you're doing.
Yeah, that was kind of the main theme of the book. But I kind of wanted to also touch on kind of I'm not a conventional traveler. I'm not one of these people that's, grown up with wanderlust my whole life. And in the first couple of chapters, I mentioned that the furthest I'd been until this point outside of the UK was the south of France, and I didn't even like it. So I hadn't gone traveling as a kid. Like we spent
It was too beautiful, wasn't it? You just couldn't handle
yeah.
it.
Yeah, so like we went to Scotland, as kids. We weren't going on holiday to like Spain or European countries or Africa or anywhere like that. It was really down to earth kind of travel, because I have a really bad phobia of snakes and my mum has a really bad phobia of flying. So put those two together and we just stayed in our country basically.
Are you
Um,
allowed to have a phobia of snakes though, as a zookeeper? I would think that'd
it's
be the
been
one of the things
tough.
they ask you in the interview. Are you afraid of snakes? And you say yes, and they automatically disqualify you.
Yeah, I've started putting it in my what's the word? In my application forms, because I
Yeah.
once went to an interview where they didn't know about my phobia, and I walked in on a like 13-foot python and completely froze and started having a phobic attack. But thankfully, I knew one of the keepers there, and she knew of my phobia, so she kind of moved me out of the way because when I see one, I just freeze and I can't really move. Yeah, she moved me out of the way, and I spent the rest of the interview actually yawning because when you come down from a phobic attack, you get like a massive adrenaline burst,
Oh yeah, right. You get
and
tired.
yeah, and then you get like really tired afterwards. So I answered all these interview questions yawning, which was really professional looking, but.
Um. So I mean, that kind of cuts off a lot of countries, doesn't it? I mean, you're not going to go to South America necessarily with a snake fear.
Well, you would think that. We ended up going to Asia. So we lived in Cambodia for a month and Vietnam for 3 months.
Some snakes in those
Yeah,
countries.
fairly large amount of snakes there, yeah. And we also lived
Yeah.
in Canada for 3 months. And Canada was actually our biggest problem snake-wise because we saw three in a
Why?
week. Well, so
Which
many
ones?
people go to Canada and they say, "Oh, I've never seen one," but we saw loads. So we saw
What
garter
kinds? Gardener
snakes.
snakes or
Yeah,
rattlesnakes?
garter snakes, and we saw a ribbon snake, which we learned is quite endangered. So in terms of like my passion for conservation, I was like, yeah, but in terms of my inner workings, I was really terrified.
So your partner is primarily interested in domesticated animals, farm animals, livestock, and
No,
things of that nature.
no, he's a zookeeper too, so any animal. His
Oh,
his
any animal.
particular yeah, his particular interest is bears. So that's why we ended
Bears.
up in Cambodia. We were working with bears there.
Do you have bears in your zoo?
We don't. We would like them eventually, but we used to have bears at the zoo I used to work at, but I didn't really work with them all that much. But me and my other half met each other because of a bear, so bears are quite big in our lives.
What is the story? The,
Okay, so my partner, he came to my zoo because we got polar bears, and he'd never seen a polar bear before, and he lived 4 hours away in a zoo down south in the UK. And yeah, he came to visit this zoo to see a polar bear because he'd never seen one before, and met me in the process.
that's pretty cool. I am definitely afraid of bears. Maybe not koala bears, but I hear they're incredibly diseased. But no, man,
Koalas have issues, but no, we've whilst we were traveling, we worked with sun bears, moon bears, and grizzly bears.
oh
And
yeah,
I've
man,
met
those are the bad
polar bears
ones.
as well. No,
So I hear they're
they
they're
you just need to
like
know
they'll
what you're
let you
doing around
live.
them.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. You need to know what you're doing, and then don't be around them. That's my opinion.
Well, in Canada, we were actually working for WildSafe BC, which is basically a
British
project where
Columbia.
they were trying to reduce bear human conflict.
Yeah.
By what we were doing was we were putting electric fencing around attractants, so things like flowering fruit trees, like areas where there's a lot of barbecues, any of those kind of smells that would bring in the bears to people's back gardens. We'd put electric fencing around, we'd put camera traps up, we'd be tracking them just to make sure that there's going to be as little conflict as possible. And it was a really good, we were working with a bear biologist out there, and it was a really good experience to see how these steps are trying to be taken, because you don't get problematic bears, you get bears who have learned that humans mean good fun food to eat.
Yeah.
So they form that association, and that's when the problem starts. So if you reduce that possibility of getting a problematic bear in the first place, then you can save a lot of bears and a lot of people, really.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I lived in Gatlinburg, Tennessee for about a year when I was younger. And my brother was up there and he was smoking a cigarette in a park. It was nighttime, just walking along. We were from Florida. We had no worry in our head at all. And he looks over and there's a freaking black bear standing like 10 feet away from him. He crapped himself. I mean, he got so scared. Like, it ruined the innocence of the area because the bear there don't care. They come down, and the people in Gatlinburg are lazy and dumb, so there's trash everywhere. They have a free buffet and they die. They get shot all the time. They kill people all the time. It's like, what do you think about that situation in Russia with the polar bears coming down and like invading?
Again, it's us that's creating the problem. The bears were here before we were, and the reason why they're coming south is climate change. There's nothing for them to eat in the north, so they are coming further south, and that's why you're actually getting pizzly bears now. So you're getting polar bears and grizzly bears meeting and mating, and they're forming these pizzly bear hybrids.
Pizzly.
Yeah, that is a genuine thing.
Pizzly
bear. Yes.
I know it's a mixture of the two. I mean, obviously they're able to mate and make babies and whatnot, but they are different, aren't they? Like,
they are.
The liver, I've heard, in like the polar bear is poisonous. It's not the case in a regular bear. I mean, how does that work exactly?
It's too much vitamin A. So if you consume polar bear liver, then you actually get an overdose of vitamin A, and your skin falls off, as an explorer found out.
Wow. So yeah, you're right though. I mean, climate change is a devastating part of this problem with bears migrating into human inhabitants or whatnot.
Yeah, and we saw it wherever we were going. There was so many problems. So the bears we were working with in Canada, they were having the best salmon run ever, but because of that, there were fewer bears, because they were all spread out, so we didn't see as many. But what they do in lower salmon years is they congregate more, and then there's more aggression, there's more competition, that kind of thing. And then when we were in other places, a lot of people were kind of saying, oh, this is, the worst year we've ever had for that. Or in terms of insects, people are being overrun with insects, because of climate change. It's getting warmer, so it's nicer for them. And in Nova Scotia, where we were having a massive snake problem, we actually went in October and we got told that we wouldn't see any snakes because it's October and they should all be hibernating. But we were out in t-shirts. It was like 22 degrees Celsius, and warm enough for the snakes. So yeah, it just really goes to show how much of a problem it is globally with all the countries we were going to.
What's going to happen? Nothing good, right?
I think if we all change, if we all try and do our little bit, then we might be able to. So that's a big part of what I do. Is it?
Like me and you, it's not even our problem. It's the kind of corporations and governments that are screwing us. It's unfortunate what's happening in Asia too, right? Because you do a good job, and there are certain Asian countries dumping their garbage into the oceans.
Again, if you think about it as it's not our problem, it's a bigger issue. Yes, it is a bigger issue, but we can all do our little bit. And if we all go into these climate change problems thinking, oh, it's somebody else's problem, it's a bigger problem than just me, it's really not. Because if you just try and kind of reduce the amount of plastic that you yourself use and everybody else is doing the same, and then there'll be penguins out there that won't mistake a piece of plastic for a fish and eat it.
Whales, right?
And
I keep hearing about whales swallowing plastic and dying with dozens and dozens of pounds in them.
Yeah, we were working with whales out in BC, and I used to work on a whale watching boat when I was younger in Scotland. And yeah, there's so many issues, but we can, if we all think of it as our responsibility to do our little bit, and it might not feel like we are making a difference, but overall we are, as well as putting pressure on the governments.
This has been a conversation that we've been having since the 80s, maybe the back end of the 70s. Have we made a difference, do you think? I mean, have we slowed it down at all? I know you're not an environmentalist necessarily, but it sounds like, I mean, you're a bird scientist, which birds are definitely feeling the climate change. I mean, they're dying left and right. They're going extinct.
Everything is. We're losing all sorts. We're losing the vaquita porpoise that will probably die out before the panda will. But in terms of it's been getting worse since the 80s, purely because of population. Our population is increasing, and we cannot, unless we do something dramatically quickly to decrease this population, then we're not going to be able to do anything. There's just too many people on this planet, and the planet cannot support it anymore.
So you're of the mind that we're overpopulated, people-wise.
Oh yes, most definitely.
Kind of slowing down in certain places.
In certain places it is, but in certain places it's really not. And some people in certain places where it should be. So obviously, if you have 5 kids out in Africa where they consume very little, there's very little in terms of kind of overconsumption of all resources, not just food, but all resources. It still has less of an impact than kind of more than 2 kids in Britain or America. It seems it, but
I've got 2 kids, and they're going to produce 1,000 times more carbon footprint, whatever term you want to use, than those 5 kids in Africa are going to their entire lives combined, probably.
Yeah, and we are the nations that have, the ability we've got access to contraception and that kind of thing. And if we don't feel like we need to do that, then therein lies a massive problem. Personally.
What, protect? I mean, not have kids.
Yeah, I'm not saying. I mean, the thing is, you have 2.
No, I have 2, and that was the decision. We made that decision as a couple.
Yeah,
we want
and
kids.
There's people out there having 5, 6, 7, 12 millions of them, and yet they do have access to contraception, and they do have access to all of these things that can prevent that. But they're choosing to have these massive families, and it's the issue. Is for me, if I were to ever have kids, I would never have more than 2. But I probably won't have kids anyway. But it's one of those things of, it takes 2 to obviously make a kid, and you're not giving any more out in terms of population. If you have more than 2, then there's more of you, kind of thing. I'm explaining that really badly.
No, I understand what you're saying. I mean, people do want to kind of replace themselves, right? I mean, that's kind of like what you want to do as a human being, allow the next generation to experience your wealth of knowledge. And a child's the best way to put that kind of knowledge out into the world. You transplant yourself into them intellectually and hope they carry it on.
Yeah.
It's like a computer program, you reprogram humanity with the next generation.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you do it, though, don't you? Like in every day, you have access to kids, and you're able to transport your ideas into their heads. Right?
Yeah, I mean, if I did have kids, I would love to be able to raise them, being really conscious of their plastic and their consumption, and raising them to absolutely love the environment as much as I do. But in terms of the kids that I get to speak to every day, if we can, I speak to some who are, the next David Attenboroughs. They are really knowledgeable. They already really care. They can tell me more about dinosaurs than I already know, kind of thing. And you just think, these are the people that are gonna carry on this legacy.
Be interested enough to read the news articles, right? Because that's where it comes from. Interest as a kid. Oh, there's a new story about fossils. I'm going to read it. And then your interest in science expands from there. They say that about kids who are interested in dinosaurs really young and retain it, have a more, accessible relationship with science. They could just reach deeper into it and not feel so uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, that certainly worked for me. I loved dinosaurs as a kid. I still do, and I'm quite happily a biologist now. So worked for me.
So dinosaurs played a big part in that. It's amazing, isn't it? The romanticism of bones.
They were
and lies. Holy crap, lies too, right? I mean, got lied to by paleontologists our entire childhood. I have no clue how old you are. They lied to me. They lied to me my entire life, and then later on they said, "Okay, guys, guess what? Basically, most of what we told you was bullshit. Here's the real truth." And
I think a lot of them didn't know any better. I grew up thinking that iguanodons had this big old pointed piece of bone on their nose at one point, and then they said, "Oh no, it's on the thumb," and then they said, "Oh no, it's somewhere else." And you just don't know. There's only so much that bones can tell you.
You don't know. I was a brontosaurus guy. I love brontosauruses. Turns out there was no such animal as a brontosaurus, right? Turns out to be complete bull hockey, or am I thinking of
I don't know. I haven't read up all that much on that. I know that they were confused as to whether you did have this long-necked giraffe-like kind of creature, and then the Diplodocus, which was kind of long-necked but in the horizontal sense, and they might have been the same thing. I don't know, but I love the fact that we're still learning.
We're still learning, man. We don't know anything really comparably. I mean, there's been millions of years worth of evolution on this planet to get to where we are now. That's
Yeah, so we
we're at
can't.
what, 200 years into it,
Yeah,
discovering it intellectually.
and we can't let that discovery die just because we've overconsumed everything. So
Have we? Oh, yeah, overconsumed it. Yeah, but then, I mean, can we fix it? Is it possible to pull back? Can humanity won't go away? Like the what is it, Tonga? That volcano in the South Pacific erupted. We went down to like 30,000 people, and we recovered. So I mean, how bad could this necessarily be?
well,
And
that's
people are.
from recovering from a low population. I
That's
don't know
true.
if we can recover from a high population.
I wonder, right? If we just start all tumbling down, the disease and the devastation would be horrible.
Well, look
Man,
at cancer. When I was growing up, cancer was a 1 in 4 people get cancer, and now it's down to 1 in 2 people. So I think cancer is actually
is that
one of
bad?
those things. I think so.
It's
Yeah.
that bad? I've not heard that statistic before.
Well,
I mean, yeah, it's
that's
something I
one
worry
thing that I
about.
read
I worry about
recently.
cancer all the time. You
Yeah.
go to the doctor, they're going to tell you something's wrong with you because they're looking for something wrong with you, thankfully. But maybe that's why it's so high now, because they've rediscovered what cancer is. But people aren't living very well. We're being poisoned by our own food manufacturers. We're becoming fatter and slower and stupider because of the stuff that we're consuming that our government allows us to have because they just want to keep making tax dollars. It's insidious.
I don't know if we're becoming stupider. I think we're becoming more reliant, more naive, and more ignorant. But I think the intelligence is still there.
The intelligence is to
But
improve stuff with, right? I don't know what we're improving anymore. I wonder. I drive over the George Washington Bridge. It's like one of the busiest bridges in the world, if not the busiest bridge in the world. And I just think, I wonder who's maintaining this thing. Is it that dude who can't stand like a civilized conversation? Is he the one turning the wrenches? Because if that's the case, I think we're all screwed. I mean, this bridge does not look like it's being maintained by anybody who knows what they're doing. And what about the next generation?
I'm guessing that they're going to hire someone who knows what they're doing in terms of bridge
Right
building.
now, when is that going to stop, though? I mean, when's it going to be bridge building 101? Is it going to be the class nobody wants to take? Because why bother?
Well, a long time ago, physics was the class that no women wanted to take, and now they love it. So I
Right.
think it
Yeah, the
depends.
future's interesting. It scares the crap out of me. I just want my kids to have a nice existence. And I do think about that in terms of what I put them on this earth for, because you're selfish, selfish, selfish. And then you're like, crap, I have to care about somebody's existence. And what are they going to
That's
have?
what a lot of people say about people who don't want kids, that they're being selfish. And it depends on their reasoning, but I don't think that is the case. I think a lot of the time they're actually
I don't
they're
think you can
making a
help it.
choice. Say
I
again?
don't think you can actually, I don't think you can, like me when I didn't have kids is a different person than afterward because you have an absence there. So you can be selfish. You know what I mean? Once you fill that absence with a thing, that choice is no longer available.
Yeah.
So in a sense, you are being selfish, but in terms of for the rest of humanity, that's just stupid. You know what I mean? Because people don't have kids all the time. Really great people don't have kids. Within generations of a really great person, they don't have any kids anymore. I mean, Abraham Lincoln lost his DNA within 3 or 4 generations. I mean, it happens. Does that make him selfish? It had nothing to do with it. And his DNA is not out there right now. So you don't reproduce, but still you're producing something. I mean,
Yeah,
your
but
book, right?
in the days of that president, there was significantly fewer people on the planet at the same time.
Well, yeah, there was. I mean, what was it, a billion? It wasn't even a billion, I don't think.
I don't
I
know.
don't know what the population was in 1865.
I have no idea.
So you are very concerned with the population. And there's really not anything we can do. Most of the post-populist people are very anti-social in terms of world community.
I think we're getting there. Documentaries like Blue Planet, that has helped massively in terms of the plastic problem. And then you've got people like organizations like zoos and conservation organizations that are really trying their hardest not only to conserve the species but to get the message out there of what we can do to help. So that's what I do a lot in my talks as a keeper, is highlight. So we can go on and on about things like lion poaching, which does happen, but I doubt that any single member of that audience who comes to a zoo in Wales really wants to go out and shoot a lion for fun. But what they might
Exactly.
want
It's probably not on there. It's not on the
It's
list.
not on their agenda, is it? So, but what we can say is if you go out to Africa, choose a tourism company that promotes and uses local people. So those local people are more passionate about protecting the wildlife than they are about killing it. Or if you go and volunteer, then make sure that you're not volunteering with a sanctuary that lets you cuddle lion cubs or, take subadults for a walk, because that is all very unethical and it leads to shot lions anyway, and also inbreeding depression in terms of genetics. So
It's the
it's
problem, though,
those things that
isn't
we
it?
can do.
You don't know. I mean,
But
I'm
again,
betting that you saw Blackfish, right? You watched that documentary about SeaWorld. And
I wouldn't call it a documentary.
you think it's more fiction?
I don't know. I don't work at SeaWorld. I cannot say what was true and what was false, but I know that it was made with a, a preface of wanting to highlight the negative aspect much more than the positive aspect. I'm very on the fence about SeaWorld. I've never been there. I don't know,
I've
but
never been either.
I do know that those keepers will do everything in their power to care for those orca as much as physically possible. But at the same time, I've worked with orca out in the wild, and well, whales out in the wild, sorry. And for me, it's much more satisfying to see them out there, and
Right?
I can't really afford a ticket to go all the way out to wherever SeaWorld is, and then
I
pay
guess
the entrance
3,
fee to get in there. But
maybe 4.
I can afford, a boat trip out from Scotland in the hope that I might see orca or that I will see whales and dolphins and that kind of thing. So the thing with Blackfish is it had a message that it wanted to get across, and that message was biased. That's all I can say on that.
Towards those whales in captivity, not towards the conservation that that particular organization may do. But they were saying that those animals were suffering, right? That was what their ultimate gist was. That was the theme throughout that entire movie, was that these whales suffer and they die suffering, and they die suffering for your entertainment. And that was what the sad part was, because they really didn't get into what was happening in the wild with the plastic and the other aspects of climate change and whatnot.
I think that is one of the very frustrating things, is that people spend so much money and put so much effort into um kind of arguing against SeaWorld and protesting and that kind of thing. And all that money and effort could go into trying to clear the oceans of plastic to protect the wild population, which is becoming extinct. So there is one wild population that we can see on UK shores, and they are all sterile. They will die out because
Ah,
this
that's
population,
horrible.
which it's absolutely awful, because people can at this moment in time see orca off the UK
I
shores in
know.
the north, and soon they won't be able to, because of what we are putting into this ocean. And there's so many people shouting about SeaWorld and using it as an example, whereas from what I know, the care for these animals at SeaWorld will be incredible, because every zookeeper I know is obsessed with animal welfare to the point where sometimes it will come above their own welfare. I have kind of spent nights in my zoo making sure that a sick animal is okay. I've spent nights where I haven't slept because I've been worrying about an animal. I've spent my free time researching in how I can improve an animal's welfare as much as possible. And the SeaWorld keepers, I'm sure, will be doing the same thing. As I say, I don't know, I've not been there, but I know that zookeepers as a whole are a tribe of people who all believe we have the same passion, we have the same desire to help these animals as much as we can. And I do know that SeaWorld do a lot in terms of funding research, funding conservation, and doing their own in terms of rehab and rescue. So
What about bigger mammals like elephants and giraffes and things like that that are stuck in captivity? I mean, does that affect you at all emotionally to see that? Or are you happy with just there's an aspect of education that allows people to learn about the environment and where these animals come from and whatnot?
well, we have giraffe at our zoo, and they are incredibly happy in the ways in which we can measure. So being happy is obviously quite a subjective statement, but we can measure their contentment in terms of
Eating?
they well,
Mating, sleeping.
feeding a giraffe is much more difficult from the human than it is the giraffe. But yeah, we have enrichment projects with them. We have training projects with them, and they do act as fantastic ambassadors. And we do see people light up when they see these giraffe. And they do go on to inspire a lot of people and to teach a lot of people. And yeah, these giraffe, they're boys, so they can't actually obviously breed here, but that has made room in other collections for their giraffe population to be able to breed, and maybe one day those giraffe might be able to go out and repopulate the wild, and they're a genetic kind of bank as well,
Yeah.
so that we can't lose these species, because giraffe are endangered, and the Giraffe Conservation Foundation are doing some amazing work, but they are trying to highlight the fact that although you see them a lot in zoos, they are incredibly endangered, some subspecies, so Rothschild giraffe in particular.
The Rothschild giraffe, is that the more traditional one?
That's one of
Or is that
the
a
subspecies.
subspecies?
There's 9 subspecies, but reticulated, I think people see most. They're the ones with the very distinctive. It's almost like kind of brown patches and then white underneath, whereas the Rothschilds are a bit more kind of orange and then the brown patch. So.
I love science people. I love talking to science people. I definitely 100% consider you a science person because you know your field so well. I mean, you could really articulate these things that make my imagination just flood with colors. You know, I'm just picturing all these different varieties of futures that we can use as information for. But
well, we need to
you're
be able
writing
to
too.
do that. Yes, I am
Right.
writing.
You're writing too, and I'm curious how you even do that. How do you put your own writing ahead of all this research that you obviously have to do to maintain this intellect or this ability to talk about this subject?
Well, in terms of researching my animal-related career, a lot of it has been done kind of as I go along. So obviously, I did a degree in animal biology. I did a lot of research as I was getting into the zoo field. But I've been in working with animals for pretty much a decade now, and kind of learn a lot as I go. But I've recently changed taxa, so I used to work a lot with mammals, and now I work with birds. So that has been a massive learning curve again. And I have been kind of writing but also researching at the same time. So I'm usually, my brain is usually very active when I come home at night. But in terms of writing, I have this whilst I'm working, whilst I'm kind of cleaning enclosures and feeding and that kind of thing. I do have this inner monologue that I found. And whilst we were traveling, I was writing all these thoughts down in blogs. So thankfully I've got those blogs to kind of look back on and remind myself and use certain bits that I quite liked in terms of writing. And then I
I do
can
the
kind of
same
sit
thing.
down and write.
Yeah, I love snippets, and then you can use those snippets for larger pieces later on down the road. Is your blog available publicly, or is it? Because I don't see it on your Twitter
It's
page, which should be on there, man.
well, I've stopped kind of adding to it now, because it was literally just to kind of document the adventures that we were doing. So it was on WordPress, and it was called Love and Crepes and Magic.
Okay, send me a link to it so I can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I can do. Yeah,
If
as I say,
cool.
I'm not adding any more to it anymore. But my book is essentially the blogs all kind of collated together into a much more cohesive thing. I think a lot of my blog looking back is just like, this is how I'm thinking and feeling, and this way I'm
That's what a
just
blog
trying to kind of
is.
collate it all together. Yeah.
First
Well,
steps, right? It's supposed
I've
to be like
realized
that.
that. Yeah,
Tumbling
I've
into
realized that
words, get
how
yourself all
different the
messed up, and
mediums
then
are.
kind of smooth it around when you're standing up. I mean, you can still do subjects now too with the conservation angle in terms of.
Yeah, I do. I write voluntarily for conservationcareers.com,
Okay.
which is I kind of conduct interviews with people who are out in the conservation field, to inspire people who are just starting out
Cool.
in the conservation field. So I've done a bit of that.
So you're a kid. Let's say you're 13 years old. You're just getting into middle school. You can guide your education a little bit. You can pick your classes and stuff a little bit. What would you recommend if they're interested in biology? What would you recommend they get their noses being into immediately, if they can?
Definitely biology, obviously, is the biggest one. A lot of people suggest English as a language, because a lot of what we do as keepers now is communicate, as you say, what people need to be learning about these animals, as well as being inspired by them. So one of the jobs that I got given, I'm fairly sure I got given because I got told I can project my voice, because I didn't have a microphone when I was working on a boat and telling people about the whales that we were seeing. So I was literally able to protect my voice, and because of that, I'm fairly sure I got a job. But yeah, so kind of being able to communicate all these quite intense and quite fact-heavy science-based concepts and be able to deliver it to a 5-year-old in an interesting way, and not in a condescending way as well. I think that's one of the bigger challenges. So I hate talking down to kids because
Right.
it's not what is going to inspire them. So yeah, I always kind of try and deliver it a little bit above where they might be at, and then if they do have questions, then they can ask. But condescending them is not going to work. So yeah, English is obviously a really good one, or drama, or just something where you are happy talking to a crowd of 200 people if you need to be, because I've had to be. So
I mean, if you're going to
biology
get
and
into
English.
conservation, I imagine Spanish would be very important too. And a lot of Spanish-speaking countries are kind of behind the times when it comes to the conservation effort, right? So if you're going to get someplace and do some good, it's going to be in those type of places.
Another language is definitely useful. Spanish obviously is a big one. Chinese is a big one, as well.
Chinese.
When I was out in Vietnam, I didn't speak any Vietnamese, but it actually benefited me to learn some. So I learned a little bit of Vietnamese, and that was certainly helpful. I learned French in school when I was a kid, and that has not been helpful in terms of conservation.
What did you learn in school?
French and German.
French. I did
Yeah.
German in college. I liked it. I thought it was a great language. Excuse me one second. But yeah, Spanish would have been a better choice. And that was high school. And it did a really crappy job teaching it to me. Because I got through with like B's and I didn't learn anything.
Yeah,
Where did my
no,
education go, guys?
But
French,
yeah,
that
no,
works in Africa, right? There's a
the other
French-speaking
thing
South
that
American country.
well, there are French-speaking ones out there, yeah. But you can say that South America is behind the times, and you actually be surprised at some of the projects going out there. So I went out to Argentina last year, as part of a work thing, and yeah, they're doing some amazing work out there. So the Atlantic rainforest is very, very endangered piece of forest, can be found nowhere else in the world, and it's full of these beautiful green parrots. And this bird park decided to go from all these beautiful, exotic, colourful birds to literally just conserving these green parrots in these green trees. And everybody said, you're going to lose out on customers coming, you're not going to make any money, you're not going to be able to do any conservation work. And actually, once they did all this change to this one biome project, as they described it, then what ended up happening is visitors kind of doubled almost. They really wanted to see what was going on because it's their forest, and and they're passionate about learning about it. So it's been really good what they can do out there, and they're very aware of what they're doing. And there's a lot of conservation organisations that are doing some amazing work out there. So I wouldn't say behind the times.
Well, I mean, I also realized that the Galapagos are part of Ecuador, right?
I think so.
Is that it?
My geography is pretty bad. To say I travel the
I think
world,
it's
my
Ecuador.
geography is terrible.
I have maps all over the place. Why don't I look at one? Yeah, and that's obviously one of the biggest ecological sanctuaries in the world, right?
Um, it depends how you define it. There's a lot going on in the Galapagos because there's
Or
so
is it a
many unique
tourist trap?
species.
Yeah.
I've been told it is. I haven't been to the Galapagos, but I know that there's a lot of work that they do there. There's a lot of work being done in Madagascar. There's a lot of work being done everywhere.
Right.
Galapagos is just it's full of these very unique and quite charismatic species. Obviously, things like the iguanas and the tortoises and things like that. So people kind of talk about it with reverence, but in the same hit, you've got Madagascar with its lemurs and all these places which are being deforested at a massive rate. The Galapagos, I think, is being affected more by climate change than it is deforestation, from what I know.
I imagine that this is the topic that you're getting into in your book, right? You're writing about this because you're so articulate about it. I can't imagine you being more hot, heated up about something else.
It's surprisingly, it's not.
Oh my God! Okay, let's change the subject to that.
I do touch upon it a lot. So I found
Okay.
myself going into a few rants. So, for example, when we were in Spain and doing this Iberian wolf project, there's a lot of fear still out in Spain about wolves. And
Yeah,
whilst
or
we
in
were
me, there's a
walking,
lot of fear in me about wolves. I mean, they're gigantic and they're mean, and
they
they
are
have this
not
group
mean,
mentality.
Brian. They are not mean.
If they're
There's
hungry, man, God, they'll be mean. I don't know. They probably don't mean
Trust
to be
me,
mean, but
there are
those teeth
billions of
will suck,
animals that I would fear more than a wolf. Trust
right?
me on that.
Oh, by itself,
Say again?
by itself, maybe. But man, a pack of wolves hunting you in the middle of the, I don't know, whatever, Spain on
They
raining
don't
on plane.
they don't have a reason to do that, honestly. Particularly Iberian wolves as a subspecies, they're incredibly shy.
Oh, really?
But yeah, a lot of people out in Spain, they still fear them. So we found when we were walking the huskies around town, we get a lot of the older generation shouting "lobo" at us, which obviously means wolf. And they just thought that these huskies, which are beautiful, friendly pet dogs, were wolves, and there was a lot of fear. And it's a real shame to see. But yeah, there
You
is no need
posted
to
that
fear
picture
them.
on Reddit, didn't you? Of you
No,
holding that dog, a big,
no,
gigantic wolf dog. No, that wasn't you. Okay.
no,
For a second there, I thought maybe I saw that picture. Dog
no.
was huge, and the woman was very tiny behind the dog. I was like, oh my God.
Now, if you leave a wolf alone, he will leave you alone.
Yeah, the scary part is when it decides it doesn't want to leave you alone. Guess that's the part of the human psyche, right? That's why
Have you
we
ever met a
fear the
wolf that want?
dark.
Have you?
I've never met a wolf. I mean, I haven't, other than my imagination.
I've
I
met
mean, what
plenty
do
of
I?
wolves, and they've all been. I don't have any scars from a
But
wolf. I've never been
I,
attacked from a
I guess
wolf.
I'm opening the subject of human animal relations throughout our history. There have been monsters, right? There are
Yeah,
monsters in the dark. There are monsters that'll sneak up and grab your children. There are
yeah. Well,
monsters out there, and that's
this
what
is
sharks are. That's what whales are. That's what cheetahs and wolves and gorillas. I mean, these things that we want to go away because our brains tell us they're dangerous.
okay. So this is where I think storytelling actually has a bit of a problem. So things like Jaws and things like Little Red Riding Hood and all these kind of things, they've put these demon
Yeah,
ideas into our
very
brain.
true.
And you know what? The last wolf in the UK was shot in Scotland in 16 something, I think, 1743
Wow.
maybe. And it was a guy who claimed that this wolf was attacking two kids. And wolves don't do that. Wolves do not attack children for absolutely no reason, particularly in a place like Scotland where there are plenty of deer around. And actually, because we are now predatorless in Scotland, we are overrun with deer. So they have a part to play. They are these apex predators, but they are also a really important keystone species because without them, the whole trophic system of a food chain completely collapses. So yeah, in the book, I've
Oh,
written
yeah.
a lot about the fact that people fear them when they don't need to. Now, it sounds hypocritical because I have a phobia of snakes, but having a phobia and having a fear are two very different things.
Well, you can get over a phobia, can't you? It's not really, it's
No,
all in your head.
no.
No.
Believe me, I have tried. I find snakes absolutely fascinating. I've been studying them since I was a little kid, and I find them incredible. But it's a very different reaction to if you see something that's scary. So, for example, I went diving with great white sharks while we were traveling,
Mhm.
and I wasn't scared at all and that's not me. I was expecting to be terrified, but it was actually a very peaceful
I get scared
experience.
of sharks in the shower. If the water's a little bit too cold, I swear to God, sharks,
With
then it's not, it is that movie, Jaws. It did it to me as a child.
It's done that to
I grew
so
up in
many
Florida
people.
too.
But
Yeah,
they're
man.
really gentle. They're
How
incredibly
gentle.
gentle species. They are. They explode with their mouth, and this is why about 90% of
With
bites
the mouth
happen.
layered with all those sharp, razor sharp teeth. I
Yes.
know, man. It's so where do you think your phobia of snakes comes from?
We don't know. We've done a lot of kind of background research into it. I've gone to a lot of kind of therapy sessions because I hate it and I want to get rid of it, and I just can't. I've had hypnotherapy. I've done all these kind of different things, and we don't know. My parents and my sister are absolutely fine with snakes. My sister loves snakes. My other half likes snakes. Used to have a pet snake. All of these things. But the first time I met a wild snake, I was 10 in France, and I knew that I already knew by that point that I was absolutely terrified of these animals. But I class it as almost like a mental disability, particularly in my line of work, because it is something that you don't necessarily know where it came from, and you can all you can do is try and control it. You can never get over it. It's like a stammer. And if people stutter, you can't get rid of it. It can never be gone from you, but you can control it. You can learn how to deal with it. So that's what I try and do with snakes.
Well, good luck with that, man. I'm happy I don't have to be put in that situation. I mean, when I was a kid, I did some pretty stupid things. I had no clue what a garter snake was or a rattlesnake was, but when I see a snake, I'd try to pick it up. And this is in Oklahoma. So probably not the
Good luck with
smartest thing in the
that.
world. Yeah, exactly. I lived. I think that's the best part of the story is I lived. I didn't have to get bit by a rattlesnake or learn what that felt like. So these are all really good moments. But still, I mean, that's when you do it, right? Something must have happened when you were a kid and screwed something up in your head.
No, I mean,
Well,
I never met a wild snake until I was 10, and as I say, that was in France. We don't have that many in the UK, thankfully.
Interesting. I mean, I don't know. Does it happen in a movie? Did you watch a movie and it freaked you out? The human
Nice.
mind is such a fascinating little machine because it can hold on to things and you don't even know what it is that it's holding on to.
Yeah, I mean, we've
I don't
tried
know.
to get to the bottom of it quite a few times, and
Right?
no one's ever been able to kind of state where it came from. I mean, I can't remember not being afraid of snakes, and it's not being passed on from my parents. It's not a genetic thing or a behavioral thing from them, because my mum and my sister are actually really bad with spiders, and I'm fine with spiders. So it's very strange. We don't know where it came from, and to be honest,
And
my
the
family
interesting
don't
thing
really
is,
understand it.
yeah, you can intellectualize it, can't you? You could actually say out loud, it makes no sense because
Yeah.
a snake can't hurt me unless it's venomous and bites me with its venom or whatever you're going to say to make it logical. But
Yeah.
in your head, that twists it. It goes from it needs to die and needs to go away from me.
I wouldn't say it needs to die because
Yeah.
we do need snakes on the planet. But let's just say
Well,
when I was in New Zealand, I was happy because there are no snakes in New
oh, there are no
Zealand.
snakes in New Zealand. Are there snakes in
Yes,
England?
there are. Yeah, there's grass snakes and adders.
Adder's poisonous? No.
Adders are venomous. So the difference between
Okay.
poison and a venom is basically if you lick it and it's poisonous, you die. If it's venomous and it bites you, then you die.
Oh, an
Adders you don't
adder's
die from.
poisonous.
No,
An
an
adder's
adder is
poison.
venomous.
Oh, venomous. Okay. What about Ireland? There's snakes in Ireland?
No snakes in Ireland, that's right.
Okay, good. Because I didn't want to be lied to. I heard that there was a saint. He came in, he took them all out. Good to go.
I don't know why there aren't any. It's probably just from when
Saint
that portion of landmass
Patrick. Don't you
separated.
know your history? He came
I
in, he
do know
grabbed them
my
all.
history, but in terms of a geological standpoint, there must have been some form of
Something,
reason.
right?
Yeah, but
Something.
yeah, no,
It
we
makes
still
no
have them
sense.
in the UK.
What, there's an island right near Panama that's just covered in rattlesnakes. That makes no sense. That's the only species on this island, except that and a bird species.
I will
They're
not be
way
going
too.
there.
No, that'd be a bad island for you.
That really would
So
be. Yeah.
tell me about your project, because we have talked a lot about conservation, which is incredibly interesting. We could do this all day long, but I want to hear about your book that you're writing.
Okay, so my book, so far it's 37,000 words we're at, and it's called An Animal
Congrats.
Compass. And
Animal comforts.
An animal compass, because
Compass,
the animals, the animals were what were guiding us in terms of exploring all these countries.
Can you go into that a little bit? What do you mean by guiding you? How did the animals help you navigate the world?
Okay, so because I'm not a natural born traveler, in fact, my very first sentence of my book is it began with my head down the toilet because I was freaking out a couple of hours before we took our first flight. I just didn't think that I could do it. I'm not a natural born traveler. I'd never been anywhere really before this, and it was just insane really what we were doing. But the thing that kind of linked all these countries together, because we didn't have this list of countries that we wanted to go to, but we did have a list of animals we wanted to see, and because of that we chose the countries that we did, and we found even more animals on the way, kind of thing. So we were working with animals in every country that we went to, and sometimes it was actually really hard because we were working with animals in Asia. So I was working in a zoo in Asia trying to improve animal welfare at that zoo, and we were also working with bears in a rescue centre within a zoo in Cambodia. And some of the things that these animals have seen, you can tell that they've been suffering and that they need our help and that kind of thing. So it can be quite difficult what you see, and obviously the selfie industry out there is huge, and elephant riding and all these things have has a massively negative impact on animal welfare.
Mm.
But at the same time, I was able to go out on a boat and see wild aqualangas, which are one of the most endangered primates on the planet. And I didn't even expect to see any primates on this trip because we didn't actually plan Vietnam. It just kind of fell into our laps almost. So we planned the first 6 months of travel, which was Spain, Italy, Norway, Cambodia, and the start of New Zealand. And then we didn't have a plan after that. So animals just took us to all these places, and we got to work with them in every place, and it was fantastic.
That's really fantastic. That is cool. How are you going to structure the book? Based on where you went next, or is it going to be based on the animals, or?
Yeah, it's based chronologically. That's just kind of the way that my mind works. But I do go back and discuss kind of my reasonings for it. A lot of what I was doing, I was trying to heal from kind of a past traumatic event, should we say. So I kind of wanted to just shake up my whole world, which is what I did. And that's one of the reasons why we traveled. So some of it is talking about kind of the healing process, and some of it is talking about why this event was so kind of traumatic, because it forced me almost to quit a job that I loved and to go to all these terrifying places way outside of my comfort zone. And I hope that when I finish it, and hopefully it will get published, that I'll be able to inspire other people who aren't natural born wanderlust field travelers and who might be actually quite scared of what they might go out and see, to do it anyway, because I did. And although I had all these aversive reactions to it, I actually had an amazing time and learned so much and met some incredible people and saw amazing animals, and my kind of experience, my skill set with animals increased as well. So it was really great for my CV too. So
Had you gone into the trip thinking that you were going to write a book, or is that just a byproduct?
I wanted to. I blogged it, as I said. So
Okay.
I blogged the experiences, and when I came home, a lot of people had been saying, "Oh, you're a really good writer," and that kind of thing, and I never really believed them. And kind of the more I write for these little side projects that I do, the more I start thinking, actually, these are getting good reactions, so maybe I'm not half bad at this. So self-doubt is a massive problem with me, if you can't already tell.
No, actually, I thought you were very confident. I really did. I'm not joking at all.
So yeah.
Oh, you're joking. You're joking. So
No.
Dry British wit. It just went right over my head.
No, I genuinely, okay. I have massive issues with self-doubt. So I wasn't sure that what I was writing was any good, but I was getting messages from people across the world actually saying that, they were enjoying what I was writing. So I came back and I thought, well, it was such an amazing experience and I have a lot to say. And I think when I read Cheryl Strayed's Wild, that kind of inspired me a bit as well to write down everything that you're thinking and feeling, and see whether you can actually put it in a book and inspire others to do the same thing. But also I do have, conservation messages. I do have responsible tourism messages in it as well. So that would be good to get out. So there's a lot of kind of themes in it.
I think this book needs to get published. Are you already in contact with a publisher, sending
stuff not yet.
out? Or?
No, as I say, I'm 37,000 words in, but I've only just finished Norway and started Cambodia. So we've still got the rest of Cambodia, the whole of New Zealand, and we were there for 4 months, the whole of Canada, and we were there for 3 months, and then Latvia as well. And then I'm thinking of doing like a little epilogue about my journey to Wales, because I'd never lived in Wales before. And that it was kind of like a really strange set of circumstances that led us here. So I was thinking of maybe tacking that on the end as well. So.
I mean, Wales is interesting, right? It's kind of what the world ended up being at one point. Very manicured, very, very much human touched and fondled.
Have you been to Wales?
I've never been to Wales at all.
Yeah, it shows. It's one of the kind of, some parts of Wales are an incredibly wild last stronghold. So you've got the Brecon Beacons, you've got Snowdonia, all these places, and there might be times when we can return some wildlife to it. So red kites have made a massive comeback here.
That's my point, though, isn't it? I mean, we've destroyed ecologies and removed animals from it. We can put them back. It's not the same animal, though. Like you said, the last Scottish wolf died about 400 years ago. That animal's done. But you could put some Iberian wolves in there, but it's not the same, is it? Is that the same
We
animal?
can put a European subspecies of wolf back in. The main issue now is again kind of industrialization almost. There's not enough wild spaces for several wolf packs, so you could have a wolf pack, but you couldn't get any. You'd get inbreeding depression and genetic bottlenecking because you wouldn't have any other individuals that they could breed with, so they'd all breed with each other. And you'd have to have it very heavily managed, so it's not ideal. But it's still a massive debate that's going on as to whether we could
Really
support them or not.
fascinating. Somebody wrote a book about the Midwest, the West out here, reintroducing wolves to the ecology, and how it helped everything. Like the banks of rivers improved. I mean, the entire environment got better because they reintroduced wolves. It's really interesting.
Well, this is the thing. We have reintroduced beavers, and that has been a massive success because they are. It's almost like gardeners of the forest, really. They kind of clear out areas and they flood areas, and it has a massive impact. But this is what people don't see. They see a wolf as this big demon killer kind of thing. They don't see it as this this entity almost that can control an environment to the extent that it needs to be controlled. So as I say, in Scotland here, we're overrun with deer because there are no natural predators. So it's having a massive impact on all our trees, on all our saplings, on our soil, and it all goes down. Everything is connected to each other. So if you lose that apex predator out of sheer fear, then you lose everything.
It makes the ocean so fantastic too. I mean, it's just so connected. One thing, I mean, that is our biosphere. Everything in that water is our biosphere. Really, just it affects everything so greatly. And I really enjoyed talking with you. I was not sure what we were going to get into, but this subject was fantastic. It was really fantastic.
Oh, good. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. As I say, any other questions, just let me know. But yeah, I don't know where this book is going to go. I'm trying to get it finished within the year. So I'm kind of doing like a country a month. So Cambodia is my April project. And then hopefully I can get everything kind of done within the year, and then I'll have to edit and then start sending it out to publishers and things. But I'm very new to the whole kind of book journey, as it were.
I hate to throw this on you, but nonfiction books, you could actually sell them to a publisher before you're done. So you could start that process right now. Yeah, as long as you know where you're going, if you have an outline, some sample chapters, potentially you could sell it way before you're done.
Really?
Yep.
Well, thank you for the tip. I will look into that.
Yeah, no problem. Get some stuff out there. I mean, they might even help you with the marketing side of things too. If you get a good publisher, send you places, influence things, get some video taken on YouTube or something. I mean, I think you're very articulate. You know what you're talking about. And I think, obviously people are screeching this message from the rooftops, and hopefully we start listening as a species, because if we don't, we're screwed. Not us, but generations from now.
There are days when you can get so depressed about the state of the world that you just think, what is the point? I can't do anything. Yeah. But you've just got to look at some of the success stories that are out there of animals that have been successfully reintroduced, and animals that are thriving now because of our help, and even people who are much more aware of their plastic usage and all these kind of things. And you just think, yeah, it might be too little too late, but we have to try, because the alternative is oblivion. So.
Well, I mean, it's going to happen anyway, but you really have to care about humanity, because it's a legacy. We've done a lot in the last, what is it? How many years? 1.5 million? I can't, whatever we've been a species. It's taking us a while to get to this point.
Yeah, there'd be a lot. There'd be a lot that we could lose, which would be sad.
Yeah, it's real special. Where can people find you on the World Wide Web, or where do you want people to be directed to find you? I'll put the website and all that stuff that you send me in the notes, but specifically, where do you want people to know where to get?
I don't really know, I guess. Well, I've got Twitter, and that is solely for my book. So I guess they could find me on Twitter. It's at BonkersBlake, I think. And then if any other questions, I guess I could send you my email address, but I don't really have a website or anything like that. As I say, it's all still very much in the writing process at the moment.
Okay. Well, again, I really enjoyed speaking with you. If you'd like to come back and talk to me after the book is published or whatnot, I'd love to have you back on.
That'd be great, Bryan. Yeah, I will definitely contact you if I get that call saying that it's going to be published.
Or even if not, if you want to go the indie route, or just talk about your blog, or just conservation in general. I find the subject incredibly fascinating.
Excellent. That's very exciting. Well, make sure you pass that on to your kids, as I'm sure you will.
They love animals.
Excellent. That's what we like to
All
hear.
right. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful evening.
Okay. Thanks. You too. Bye.